Hello and welcome to the Actual Magician's Bookshelf. Yes, I am an actual magician. So in this video we have reached video 5 of our Beginner's Occult Kabbalah series, and I'd just like to end with a conclusion video, and we're going to take a quick look at the books I've recommended, and I'm going to reveal a massive occult secret that's been hidden for 100 years or so, that's been completely ignored, and it shows how understanding Kabbalah can help us understand primary sources for the occult and for Western Esotericism, particularly Aleister Crowley, A. Waite, Eliphas Levi, and all of the giants on whose shoulders we stand. So again, I'd just like to quickly start to conclude and give a summary of what we've covered in these five videos. And the mystical Kabbalah is still recommended as the sort of quintessential occult mystical Kabbalah by Dion Fortune, and it's somewhat dated to some extent, but Dion Fortune was way ahead of her time, so it's not that dated, and a lot of people have riffed off this, and then people have riffed off those people and so forth. And when you go back to the mystical Kabbalah, you'll see where a lot of people have got their innovative new ideas from. It's all already in here. So mystical Kabbalah, do yourself a favour and definitely have this to hand. It's a book I go back and read religiously every couple of years and find new material in it. It's like she's snuck in and written a few extra pages or a really important paragraph that I hadn't seen before. So the mystical Kabbalah recommended, and then to bring yourself up to speed, I would also recommend the Sephirot by David Shulman and the Book of Letters by Lawrence Kushner, and both of those two books will give you something on the Sephirot and something on the Hebrew letters themselves, and then you can deepen your understanding of the structure of the Kabbalah as it's used in the occult, in Western Esotericism with the mystical Kabbalah, and then apply it in a safe, interesting, magical manner with the Inner Guide Meditation by the late Edwin C. Steinbrecher. I used this book for years and years and years, still use it to this day. Similarly with the mystical Kabbalah and the Book of Letters and the Sephirot, all of these books are shelved on my two-hand shelf. You'll notice they're all in the light there, just off camera, so I always have them to hand out of the 3,000 or 4,000 books that I have. These are four of the maybe 120 books, 200 books that I always keep to hand. They're the first out the window in case of a fire, and these are my mainstay. So as a beginner, you can do a shortcut to 45 years of buying lots of other books and just buy these. I'd highly recommend them. So what we're going to take a look at then is actually a little section in the Pictorial Key to the Tarot by Arthur Edward Waite, accompanying the deck that he did with Pamela Coleman Smith, who did the artwork for it and likely co-designed the minor arcana and the court cards certainly. And right at the back of this is a little paragraph that I'd like to go into in a bit more detail from our understanding of the occult Kabbalah. Now, just before we do that, and I'm going to reference something in Abiding in the Sanctuary, but you don't need this book to understand where we're going with this particular lesson. I just wanted to cover 4 things that I made a note of here before we get on to the big reveal that we've covered in these lessons. So first of all, number 1 is that Malkuth in the map, and these might sound abstract, but I think they're really important just to get in your head before you even start with Kabbalah. Malkuth is not this. A lot of people tend to talk about Malkuth as the manifest world, but Malkuth is not the manifest world. In effect, the relationship between Yesod and Malkuth is the world, and we literally remember that by having the World Tarot card on that path, illustrated corresponding to that path. So the first thing is to understand the difference between the paths and the Sephiroth. It's Sephiroth, it's plural, Sephira is just one of them, and there is a difference between the paths on the Tree of Life and the Sephiroth, a sort of map difference, a geographic, locational, spiritual difference between the paths and the Sephiroth. The Sephiroth map the creative process, the divine process of manifesting the entire universe, and the paths going up are our journey or our experience of that creation that happens in real time, going backwards and forwards. So in effect, they are simultaneous and equivalent, but they are different in experience, in existence. So these Sephiroth are essentially unknowable. We know that they exist in the map because we understand what arises out of their relationship, a bit like a sort of cosmic game of battleships. We can map where the battleships aren't and therefore work out where the battleships are. And the Sephiroth are the creative flow of things, and the paths are our journey going back up the tree to recover some sort of unity between what appears to be the case and what actual true reality, experience, the full-on singular truth of all things actually is in experience, in reality. The recognition or the remembering of our forgetfulness of that is the journey that we take back up the paths on the Tree of Life. As a result of that first thing, that the paths and the Sephiroth are somewhat different, the second thing is that this is not Malkuth. Our experience of the universe is actually arising on this path here that is between Yesod and Malkuth on the map. So when people talk about this is Malkuth, it's everyday reality and so forth, that is certainly not the case as far as the map is. It's a bit like saying Berlin is actually Paris or something like that. The location of our experience of the world is illustrated by the correspondence of the World Tarot card on the path between Yesod and Malkuth. Malkuth is in effect the base level of all reality, which is identical to Kether, and Yesod is our separative ego process, sensory process, all of the things that go on to make an identity that is separate to that reality that happens when we're about 3 months, 6 months old or something. In child development, we separate out from a sense of non-dualistic existence and we suddenly become a self. And that happens in this point. And from that point, we cannot know ourselves fully because the person doing the knowing is still separate to that which is known. And we can go down a whole illusionary treasure house of mirrors in Yesod itself and still be none the wiser. And that is because our experience is actually arising from these two unknowable truths, these two unknowable things. So first thing is that the paths and the Sephiroth map something slightly different. The second thing is that Malkuth and Yesod are also very different, and that is because on the map the Sephiroth and paths are different. And the first thing that we can explain by that, map by that, is this is not our real world experience. This is our experience of whatever the true reality actually is. And we can actually use that same understanding, like for example, Darth on the Tree of Life, meaning knowledge, arises out of Bina and Hokmah. So what does that mean? What does that mean about knowledge, if knowledge is arising out of something else? And we can explain all sorts of things from that fundamental understanding. So that's the first two things. First thing, paths and Sephiroth are different. The second thing is that as a result of that understanding of the map, we can then deduce from the map that our experience of the world can be changed, can be shifted, and that is because it's arising and it's vibrating in between these two things. And that's why mind-altering chemicals, why trauma, why all sorts of things can shift our reality very, very strongly, and that's because it's arising in a sort of vibrational pattern here. The third thing then is correspondences. The importance of correspondences in Western Esotericism is never to be forgotten and not to be not looked at. When we have these maps, these correspondences, we have to realize that everything is symbolic, everything is a sacrament, everything is a map, a challenge, a resource, and a lesson of our ultimate unity in existence. And therefore everything is a symbol, is a correspondence to that distance that we have to the sense of unity. As a result, we are using, as Author Edward Waite said, the keys to the great paths, to the secret paths. And that's what not just tarot is, and according to Waite, but all illustration, all maps, the alchemical process, astrology, science, psychology, philosophy, religion, they are all symbolic. They all use correspondences. They all use symbols to point to something else. And therefore we have to say that the fourth thing I've got down here is symbols of what then? Well, it's symbols of the distance in our state and experience of reality. It is a measure. All of our learning is a measure of the distance of our experience to the experience of absolute truth in the present moment, in our awareness of existence. And as a result, my final line on this is the universe is an act of inquiry. I think I had that sort of personal insight when I was about 17 or something, and went to my occult teacher at the time, sort of a bit like Frater Achad did, Charles Stanfield Jones, running through the streets, having taken off all of his clothes, yelling, "I have cast off the veils of illusion." And I went to my teacher with, the universe is an act of inquiry. That's what it is, man. Everything is an act of inquiry. The universe is inquiring into itself. That's true. That's reality. I've sort of cracked it. I've become illuminated at last. So the universe is an act of inquiry. I still hold to that, and maybe not as vehemently as I once did as a youngster, but it is a measure of the distance between one thing and another. It all functions through correspondence, because we are map-making creatures within a universe whose fundamental act is to inquire into itself. And that is why we inquire into ourselves. And this is why magic and the occult and Western Esotericism are so important, because they function as additional tools to inquire into the universe. If I cast a spell, if I do a divination, if I do X, Y, and Z, a sigil, some chaos magic, summon an Enochian spirit, whatever it might be, that is a fundamental act of inquiry, in the same way as dropping an object is. We are inquiring into the nature of the universe in which we find ourselves, literally. So, having said that then, let's take a look at one nice example of that all coming together, really, as we reach our sort of final session here. In this particular series, I'm going to do plenty more series on intermediate Kabbalah, advanced Kabbalah, spell casting, and so forth. And also, I now have a members function on the YouTube channel, and we have a Patreon as well that we're setting up. We've been meaning to do it for years and years and years, but our little occult order has been working diligently away in the background for many, many years, and we just want a sustainable way of opening it up to people who are interested in this approach to Western Esotericism and to the Western Esoteric industry system that I teach. So this is a good example of what we're working on at the moment. We've just finished the Spiritual Key to the Tarot, which is a 8-year book project research into Arthur Edward Waite that I mentioned in other videos. But this is one of the things where we found something interesting in the very conclusion, and it really does show all of these things in one place together. So I'm just going to read out, and it is literally the very last page that Waite writes, and he says so, I think, before the bibliography, which is quite interesting in itself. But Waite says this, and if you'll excuse me, I'll read out the whole thing. And now, in conclusion as to the whole matter, I have left for these last words, as if by way of an epilogue, one further and final point. It is in the sense in which I regard the trumps major, the major arcana, as containing secret doctrine. So we're going to find out what the secret doctrine actually is in this final paragraph, where it is saying, this is why I've written about the major arcana. I do not here mean that I am acquainted with orders and fraternities in which such doctrine reposes, and is there found to be part of higher tarot knowledge. He's referring to not being a member of the Golden Dawn when he is. I do not mean that such doctrine, being so preserved and transmitted in the magical orders, can be constructed as embedded independently in the trumps major. Again, typical way going around the houses a bit there. I do not mean that it is something apart from the tarot. So what does he mean? If it's not something that's taught in the magical orders, and it's not something that is intrinsically in the tarot, but it is something that is demonstrated by the tarot, what could he mean? Associations exist which have special knowledge of both kinds. Some of it is deduced from the tarot, and some of it is apart therefrom. Now, to cut a long story short, he's really referring to sacramentalism there, as we make clear in the course and the book, The Spiritual Key to the Tarot. But there are also things in reserve which are not in orders or societies, but are transmitted after another manner. Now that line, are transmitted after another manner, is what you and I are about to do in this moment. This is not in a magical order, not in a magical society. It is not part of what people understand by tarot, but this is how it is transmitted in a YouTube video on this case. So I sometimes say about the occult tradition, it is the greatest of secrets passed through the most unlikely of hands. So I'd like to pass this to you. Apart from all inheritance of this kind, let anyone who is a mystic consider separately and in combination the magician, the fool, the high priestess, the hierophant, the empress, the emperor, the hanged man, and the tower. Let him then consider the card called the Last Judgment. They contain the legend of the soul. They contain the legend of the soul. They contain the legend of the soul. Now, this is what everyone has missed about Waite. He really means what he says, and it is as literal as what he says. It always has a profound meaning. They contain the legend of the soul. The other trumps major, the other major arcana, are the details, and as one might say, the accidents. Perhaps such a person, which is going to be you in a moment, will begin to understand what lies far behind these symbols, by whomsoever first invented and however preserved. If he does, she, or if they do, they will see also why I have concerned myself with the subject, even at the risk of writing about divination by tarot, by the cards. So he leaves us with a big clue. He actually says, consider these cards. Take these cards. They are that which is not in magical orders or societies. This is being transmitted after another manner, and anyone who wants to understand it should take these cards in combination and consider them, because they contain the legend of the soul, and the other cards, major cards, are the details. So why is it then the magician, the fool, the high priestess, the hierophant, the empress, the emperor, the hanged man, and the tower, and then consider the last judgment card as well? Now, when we were writing the book, we went through those and we thought we can test whether we've got Waite right by understanding those cards and by putting our single line understanding of what Waite meant against those cards and not the others, and see what he says about those. Now, if this were a modern book and Waite weren't trying to show us how secret teaching is actually transmitted, there'd be diagrams and tables to go with that, because otherwise, like our publishers, Llewellyn, bless their cotton socks, would say, don't make the reader work. Your job as a writer is to help them understand and to make it accessible. So why would we just do a list in a paragraph and say that it's important without then putting it into a table and a diagram and so on? But Waite wasn't doing that. He wasn't writing for a contemporary audience. He was writing for anyone who is a mystic. That's who he was writing for. So we take those cards and we list them. And what we do is we list them according to the map that Waite had for the FRC, not the Golden Dawn correspondences. If you draw them on the Tree of Life, those particular cards, you get a sort of a pattern. There's enough to think that there's something going on. But it's really when we look at it in terms of the Waite Trinic or the FRC pattern of correspondences that Waite had. So I'm going to go back to what I was showing you here. And actually, we can add a fifth thing to our most important things while I think of it in this fifth lesson, maps. So not only are the cards and the tarot and the Enochian and everything else symbols and correspondences, but they are also maps, and they function as a map. And there are several different methods, and I use several different methods of correspondence for the Tree of Life. I recommend to you as a beginner, if you're watching this as a beginner, to learn the Golden Dawn first, because that is the one that other people then derived from or diverted from or extemporized upon and so forth. Learn one map first. It's like the Ordnance Survey map of maps. But sometimes, for example, if you are visiting a city as a tourist on foot, you need a train map and you need a ground map, and ideally it should have contours on it so you know if you're going to have to walk up some hills to get to where you might want to go. It might have the tourist locations marked on it. But then if you're driving, then you want a GPS sort of map, a navigation map with all of the one-way roads on it, with all of the, you don't need to know the hills, but you do need to know the one-way system. So there's one map if you're going by car, there's one map if you're walking around as a tourist, for example. They are the same place. It's exactly the same place. It's just a different map. To me, the Golden Dawn map of Kabbalah and the correspondences is a very good map for magic. The Waite Trinic map, and we can briefly look at that in a second, is very good for spirituality and mysticism in a very generic sense for both of those, as magick is for the Golden Dawn. Aleister Crowley's slightly altered map from the Golden Dawn is very good for psychology, for understanding the way the mind works according to the Tree of Life. It's good for Thelema, it's essential for Thelema, even though in the Book of Thoth, Crowley did get it the other way round, say for the Emperor and the Star. He forgot he'd swapped those around according to the Book of the Law. But so even the person who did the map can sometimes get lost in it, because it's a map of a very, very big place. And so there are 3 different maps there, and I actually have a 4th map, which is our own map within the Order of Everlasting Day, which takes the Waite Trinic map and just swaps one thing with it, 2 cards with it, in order to satisfy my own experience and my own map that I want to teach with Western Esoteric Inistry work. So that's an Inistry map. So we have an Inistry map, a spiritual map, a magical map, and a psychological map. And that's how I see the different correspondences. So all of these arguments that you might see online, or discussions about should I use the Golden Dawn system of correspondences, or Gray's correspondences, or Butler's correspondences, or whoever it might be, just think of them as different maps and understand what the map is of, what it's better suited for, because they're all of the same place, this, and our relationship here. They're all maps in the world here. That's all. We're looking at the entire universe through them. So let's take a look then at the cards that Waite talked about in that last paragraph then. So he talks about the Empress and the Emperor, which on his FRC map, his mystical spiritual map, are at the top of the Tree of Life. And that's really wonderful. In the Golden Dawn, it's the Fool and the Magician up here, but Waite has the Empress and the Emperor, because they are the supreme masculine and feminine symbols. As the world splits into duality, as the universe splits into apparent duality. But also he felt that the Empress was the sacrament of nature and the Emperor was the sacrament of mind. So everything is revealed through nature or the mind. And that's how Waite saw it, and the relationship of nature and the mind. That's nature as in all existence, not just as in, Pox and Rex. So, and the Emperor is the spiritual mind, all aspects of thought, cognition, contemplation, comprehension, mental experience. We exist at the top of the Tree of Life as a unity of nature and mind. And we have in Buddhism things like mind is all and so on, or in paganism nature is all and so forth. So that fits. So we can see why Waite thought that we should contemplate those as part of the container of the soul. Then he also talked about the Fool and the Magician in that list. And those actually correspond to these 2 paths, the Fool and the Magician, and they are opposite each other. So the Fool is the pure spirit released from existence, and the Magician is the spirit entering into existence, as above, so below, and the Fool is jumping off altogether. So there's a nice parallel between those. Similarly, he then talks about the Hanged Man and the Hierophant. You can see where this is going, I hope. The Hanged Man and the Hierophant. Now, to Waite, the Hierophant was all external religion, all external teachings, all external understanding of the world, and the Hanged Man was the divine in the world, the actual drowned giant, the spirituality in the world that can be found through personal experience. So this is like the Gnosticism, and this is the external religion, but it's also all secular thinking as well, and philosophy, just maps on the outside of the surface of things, whereas the Hangman is our own mystical experience. And then he talked about the Blasted Tower, which is down here. And he talked about the Last Judgment. Oops, sorry, I got that wrong. Last Judgment. So the Last Judgment is here and the Blasted Tower is down here. And the Blasted Tower is obviously our fall, our descent, our fall into matter from spirit, and the Last Judgment is our rise from matter back to spirit as we come out of the graves of mortality up here. So we've got one down here, and then he mentions the High Priestess, which in his version runs between Darth and Tifreth. Now, there are only 9 cards that he lists there, but we can see what he's drawn. He's basically told us that the container of the soul is drawn of those cards, because there's literally the outside paths on the Tree of Life with the cross in the middle. And what is a circuit or circle with the cross into Waite? It is literally, in effect, the sacramental wafer or the rose cross. They're all symbols. And this is spirit sacrificed into matter, or matter sacrificing itself to spirit up here on the Tree of Life. There is only one card that we need to add to unlock Waite's final mystery that he has put there. And that is obviously to draw in the last final path to make a nice 10, to put the star in, almost as if Waite has provided the lock and we have to provide the key for the rose cross. And the star to Waite meant, he specifies it very clearly, even in pictorial key, it means one thing most of all. It is literally the naked truth. So in that last paragraph, hidden at the back of a little book about how to read tarot cards for your friends and family, Waite has actually put the way that teachings are transmitted through symbols, through there being a pattern within a pattern within a pattern within a pattern, and it is all symbolic of the unity of the soul with the divine. Whether he is trying to draw a rose cross on the Tree of Life through the corresponding tarot cards, this is how it's transmitted. It's transmitted by understanding the language of correspondence, the language of symbolism, and the language that speaks of our spiritual nature through occult understanding, through the Occult Kabbalah. So this is quite a sort of advanced teaching that I managed to sneak in, I hope, into our 5th lesson and final lesson in our Occult Beginners series, Occult Kabbalah Beginners series at least. But I hope it shows how understanding all of these layers enriches us in terms of the map that we have to really look at the whole of existence itself. And I'm going to be covering a lot more. We're going to be talking about the spiritual key to the tarot as well in further videos. And also, now that we have our members options and things like that, do join me for members only videos, because I'll be doing a lot more of those. I want to put a lot of work into the channel this year. So thank you again for joining with me in this series. I hope you found it useful. Do all of the good things like likes and comments in particular. I'm more interested in comments and feedback and questions, because as we have learnt, most of all, the universe, man, is an act of inquiry. So do join in with what the universe is already doing. We are asking of ourselves, what the hell is all of this? And we do it through correspondence, we do it through the Tree of Life, and I hope I've given you some insight into how we can start to do that and find these keys that unlock real experience and eventually lead to magical, psychological, mystical and spiritual experience the further on you develop once you have the foundation already in there. So thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Check out the members section, and we have a Patreon that we'll be linking to probably within the next week for the spring equinox. And we are offering the Crucible Club that we've offered for many years now, which is a 1-year self-study in this, and it is the way to join our Order of Everlasting Day as well. If you find our material and find the way we work with the Western Esoteric and History system of interest to you. And all of that's now being moved to Patreon with a little Discord channel as well, to keep it real with the kids. So thanks a lot again for your support, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. And until then, as ever, the worker is hidden in the workshop.